Lavinia paced to the far side of the Fairfax library, less interested in a book than in an excuse. Something to hold in her hand so that Marigold wouldn't see her sitting idle and ask what was wrong. Ordinarily, it wouldn't have been enough to work. Her oldest friend would notice if she didn't turn pages at the proper pace. But it stood a chance, given her own exhaustion. She had in fact gone up to rest, but she promised to be back down within an hour. Not daring to doubt her word, Lavinia had instead decided on finding false occupation. She pulled a book at random from the shelf and returned to the drawing-room. Her muscles felt as though they were made of lead. They'd been feeling that way for months, growing heavier and heavier with each passing day. She hadn't mentioned it to Papa. If she did, she knew she'd have gotten that worried frown he'd given her far too often in the last 6 years. The one she knew was born of love, but which made her feel like a burden. He'd insist she go home to Alnwick Abbey, which sounded lovely on the one hand, but he couldn't go yet, and the last thing in the world she wanted was to be alone at their estate. There were too many memories there. Too much of Mother still haunted the halls. Too many pieces of Lavinia's childhood greeted her everywhere she turned, taunting her. Perhaps it was a lie, each room seemed to say. That laughter was false. That embrace was for show. She never loved either of you. Sitting back on the same sofa she'd occupied before, Lavinia opened the book and smirked at the title page. One of Graham's books of architecture, it seemed, a treatise on the medieval cathedrals of France. Thrilling. She'd read far more widely during her illness than any of her friends would realize, but she had to admit that books like these rarely held her attention, even when she had nothing else to distract her. Now, hopeless. And pretending to read it would be as much a giveaway of her state of mind as staring blindly out the window. But with a bit of luck, Marigold wouldn't notice the title when she came back down. Luck would have to suffice, because she was not walking down that corridor again. She intended to stay right here on this comfortable cushion, and savour the fact that she had no memories of her mother in this room. There were no ghosts to haunt her here. None but the ones in her own heart. Daughter of a traitor. That makes you half a traitor yourself. Untrustworthy, unworthy, unloved. She flipped past the title page and to the opening paragraphs. Then, for good measure, went ahead and flipped to Chapter 2, so that when Marigold returned, it would look as though she'd been doing something.